Today's topic is meditations upon our innermost self from the Svetasvatara Upanishad. And if you have the Upanishad with you, it's good to follow along verse by verse. But first, let us review our last talk, which was the beginning of chapter 3. There are three themes in the beginning of this chapter. The first two are unity, the one absolute existence, and the second is sovereignty, the personal God who is master of Maya. Maya is the creative energy of Brahman, by which this universe is projected, sustained, and ultimately withdrawn back into Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna further explained, creation is likened to the spider and its web. The spider brings the web out of itself and then remains within it. God is the container of the universe and also what is contained in it. It's a beautiful example that helps us to hook our mind onto this lofty philosophical concept. And so in this example, we see that Brahman and Maya are inseparable. Maya cannot exist without Brahman. However, Brahman can exist without Maya. Maya's nature is like a net. It ensnares. But the possessor of the net, Ishvara, the personal God, Brahman in association with Maya, is in no way under its spell. Ishvara is Brahman with qualities. It's the power of Brahman, the personal God, whom Sri Ramakrishna called the Divine Mother. Sri Ramakrishna explained the philosophical Vedanta principle with a characteristically simple example. Brahman and Shakti, Shakti being the power of Brahman, are like snake and its wriggling motion. Thinking of the snake, one must think of its wriggling motion. And thinking of its wriggling motion, one must think of the snake. The two are interconnected. What's the difference between Ishvara then, the personal God, and an ordinary jiva or individual like you and me? The personal God and the individual man or woman are composed of the same three gunas which produce this universe. But the personal God is master of Maya, whereas the individual, jiva, is its slave. The second point is that the personal God has a far greater manifestation of power than an ordinary mortal. In other words, we may become one with the personal God, but we can never be the same as the personal God. The third theme in this third chapter is Brahman is both the efficient and material cause of this universe. How can we understand this? Unlike a clay pot, whereby a potter took some clay material that is separate from himself and molded it into a pot, this universe is not created from a separate existing substance. It is manifested. And the example is given of a tree. Where did it come from? A seed. In other words, the tree was at one time within the seed in a latent form. So everything comes from Brahman, is sustained in Brahman, and returns to Brahman. The Svetasvatara Upanishad also reveals Brahman's domain. It's not just one world, this world that we see, but it is innumerable worlds. This universe is just a part of his unfathomable, immense being. Swami Pravrajika in his commentary explained the mystery of it all is that being again dwells within the cavity of the heart. Then we can begin to understand the Katha Upanishad verses. That being the size of a thumb dwells deep within the heart. smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest, this self forever, within the hearts of all. In other words, the Swami continues, space, time are within him. He is not within space and time. And our mind cannot even conceive of this, because to conceive of anything, the mind has to conceive in space, time, and relativity. Yes, that's another example of how this mind is matter. It is not who we are. It is subtle matter. This Upanishad poetically conveys Brahman's all-pervading existence. How can we even begin to imagine? But our teachers tell us, if we transcend the relative world by diving deep within our own awareness, we will experience the whole universal consciousness, that infinite God in one point of consciousness. All within one point of consciousness. And upon returning to normal awareness, we will know that there is only one existence, and that all names and forms are but waves on that one infinite ocean of consciousness. We will also see every face as the face of God. What a wonderful experience to have. Sri Ramakrishna shared with his disciples, I have clearly perceived all these things. It has been revealed to me that there exists an ocean of consciousness without limit. From it comes all things of the relative plane, and in it they merge again. All this has been revealed to me. This Upanishad describes Ishvara. He is the origin and support of the gods. He is the Lord of all. He confers bliss and wisdom upon those who are devoted to him. He destroys their sins and their sorrows. Well, how, we may ask? Through the sacred syllable Om, which is one with Brahman. The pranava is the most ancient sound symbol representing Ishvara, the ground of existence. By meditation on its meaning over time, we begin to learn to concentrate and thereby intuit and ultimately experience reality, the reality it represents. In his Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda further described the metaphysical basis of the pranava Om. He wrote that there must be a common substratum among all the different names of God, and that is the best representation of the ultimate reality. He wrote, Om is such a symbol, the basis of all sounds. Thus, Om represents the whole phenomena of sound production. As such, it must be the natural symbol, the matrix of all the various sounds. It denotes the whole range and possibility of all the words that can be made. Finally, we ended our last talk with the verses 7 and 8, within which are two great axiomatic statements. First, they not only proclaim the thrilling truth that the highest reality, Brahman, consciousness itself, has expanded forth as every kind of living being. But it is not only possible to realize that, we must, here and now. In 1922, Swami Turiyananda wrote a beautiful letter to that effect to a devotee. And it seems the words are also meant for us. He wrote, you want to see the Lord in everything. Why then do you not begin to see the Lord in everything, even from now? Just try, and you shall succeed. If you don't try, even from this moment, he wrote, you shall never be able to see him in everything at any time. You must do it, and nobody else shall do it for you. Therefore, Go on seeing him that way, and practice will make you perfect. Wholehearted sincerity, that is what we need most. Now we come to verse 9. Svetasvatara said, there is nothing superior to him, meaning Brahman, nothing different from him, nothing subtler or greater than he. Alone he stands, changeless, self-luminous. He, the Great One, fills this universe. In the Katha Upanishad, we find this echoes the same thought. In this verse, chapter 1, section 2, verses 18 through 20, when Yama tells Nachiketa, the self residing in the hearts of all is, quote, smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest. In other words, the self transcends any limitation. And that self is within each and every one of us. And when Svetasvatara tells us he fills this universe, we're reminded that Sri Ramakrishna also said, God is the container of the universe. And also what is contained in it. But what does that mean? It's impossible for us to wrap our heads around that which transcends time, space, and causation. If we try to conceive of that supreme being in space, filling this universe, where is space? Space is a mode of thinking in the mind, which in itself is subtle matter, because mind exists only within time, space, and causation, and therefore has no lasting reality. In his lecture, Vedanta and Privilege, Vivekananda explains the implication. This universe, as we know and think it, does not exist. The unchangeable has not changed. The whole of this universe is mere appearance and not reality. This idea of parts and little beings and differentiations is only apparent, not the nature of the thing itself. God has not changed at all and has not become the universe at all. He goes on. We see God as the universe because we have to look through time, space, and causation. It is time, space, and causation that makes this differentiation apparently, but not really. That does not mean that this universe does not exist. It exists, but at the same time, it is not what we take it for. Advaita Vedanta illustrates this truth with the example. In the darkness of the night, a stump of a tree is looked upon as a ghost by some superstitious person, as a policeman by a robber, as a friend by someone waiting for his companion. In all of these cases, the stump of the tree did not change, but there are apparent changes, and these changes were in the minds of those who saw it. In the minds of those who saw it. So, Vivekananda explains, every form in the universe is partly our creation and partly something outside. Now, what the Vedanta holds is that, in truth, this X and Y, partly our creation and partly something outside, are one and the same. Now, what does that mean? According to Vivekananda, Vedanta explains, you and I and everything in the universe are that absolute, not parts, but the whole, of infinite reality. You are the whole of that absolute, and so are all others. Because the idea of part cannot come into it. These divisions, these limitations are only apparent, not in the thing itself. That's so thrilling. This truth is so thrilling that you and I are the whole of that infinite reality. In other words, Brahman pervades this universe. It is the only substance of this universe and of you and me. But names and forms are created by Maya. Maya has qualified the unqualified. Now we come to verse 10. Though he fills the universe, he transcends it. Again, he's speaking of Brahman. He is untouched by the miseries. He has no form. Those who know him become immortal. Others remain in the depths of misery. Though he fills the universe, he transcends it. Sri Ramakrishna, an exponent of the modern Vedanta movement, proclaimed from his own experience, God is both personal and impersonal, immanent and transcendent. Not only that, by example, the master simply and systematically guides the aspirant to understand and ultimately accept both. He said, as long as one has not realized God, one should renounce the world following the process of neti neti, not this, not that, not the mind, not the body, not all of these physical objects we see. But he who has attained God knows that it is God who has become all this. Then he sees that God, Maya, living beings, and the universe form one whole God, includes the universe and its living beings. For example, suppose you have separated the shell, the flesh, and the seeds of a bell fruit, and someone asks you the weight of the fruit. Will you leave aside the shell and seeds and weigh only the flesh? Sri Ramakrishna says, not at all. To know the real weight of the fruit, you must weigh the whole of it, the shell, the flesh, and the seeds. Only then can you tell its real weight. The shell may be likened to the universe, and the seeds to living beings. Now here, nirvikalpa samadhi, when one completely transcends the mind, this universe, there is no I and no you. It's the highest attainment. But a higher achievement is a state of vijnana, where the realized soul comes back and sees this universe pervaded by this divine Shakti. Sri Ramakrishna says, while one is engaged in discrimination, one says to oneself that the universe and the living beings are non-self and unsubstantial. Well, we must begin on the first rung of the ladder. Otherwise, we fall. At that time, one thinks of the flesh alone, the self, as the substance, and the shell, the universe, and seeds, living beings, as unsubstantial. So this Maya is a dream or a mirage. But after discrimination is over, one feels that all three parts of the fruit together form a unity. Then one further realizes that the stuff that has produced the flesh of the fruit has also produced the shell and seeds. To know the real nature of the bell fruit, one must know all three. These philosophical truths we go over again and again. We study the scriptures, we meditate, we perform karma yoga, we perform bhakti yoga, all of the 4 yogas to purify the mind, until one day we begin to get an inkling, insights a spiritual insight into these great truths. So what does this look like? Brahman everywhere. Swami Brahmananda, also known as Raja Maharaj, a name that Swami Vivekananda gave him, that he could be the ruler of a kingdom, once told Swami Pravrajika, who related to us in the convent in Santa Barbara. One day, Swami Vivekananda, he, Raja Maharaj, and several other brother disciples were seated on the western veranda of Bellarmine. Suddenly, Swamiji Vivekananda said to Maharaj, "Raja, don't you see Brahman? Brahman is everywhere." Maharaj said that Swamiji's spiritual awareness was so intense that their minds were lifted up immediately and they saw Brahman everywhere. Verse 11. The Lord God, all-pervading and omnipresent, dwells in the heart of all beings. Full of grace, he ultimately gives liberation to all creatures by turning their faces toward himself. It's beautiful. To describe the self as the personal God, Svetasvatara uses the word Bhagavan, meaning the glorious Lord, often applied to Sri Krishna in the Gita and to Rudra, Lord Shiva, elsewhere in the scriptures. How can we begin to grasp that which is all-pervading and omnipresent by this little mind of ours? Otherwise, these scriptures are just words and have no meaning for us. In reading and studying the life of Sri Ramakrishna and his disciples, we receive a glimpse of what that divine being may be like. And such glimpses enliven our spiritual understanding of the scriptures and are well worth meditating upon. Swami Ramakrishnananda said, Sri Ramakrishna's heart was as broad as infinite space, so he could appreciate all the religions of the world. He used to say, never say that God is this or that. No one has yet been able to know God as he really is, and no one ever will. He is the ocean of consciousness. Sages like Shuka, Sanaka, and Narada drank a drop of that ocean and became God intoxicated. I have experienced God as with form, without form, and again beyond both. But what he really is, I do not know. This is coming from an avatar whose prolific and deep spiritual experiences, including the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, in which he lived for 6 months, far surpass what is known to have been attained by any other avatar in recorded history. At another time, Sri Ramakrishna revealed to Trilokanath Dev an extraordinary manifestation of this divine being. He said, I saw an effulgent being who covered my heart and soul with an extraordinary divine light. After a while, it disappeared. I then fervently prayed, will you not reveal yourself again? I heard the response, whenever you call me, you will see me. Trilokanath then recounted, when Sri Ramakrishna told me the story, tears came from his eyes. I was overwhelmed by the divine beauty of that perfected soul's face and sat down at his feet. I can't describe the celestial beauty. Ramakrishna said, I am truly blessed. Full of grace, he ultimately gives liberation to all creatures by turning their faces toward himself. This is another beautiful truth, that one day we too will feel his grace. Then it is that he turns our face towards him and we realize him. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, one can see God only if he turns his light toward his own face. The police sergeant goes his rounds in the dark of night with a lantern in his hand. No one sees his face, but with the help of that light, the sergeant sees everybody's face, and others too can see one another. He finishes, if you want to see the sergeant, however, you must pray to him. Sir, please turn the light on your own face. Let me see you. In the same way, one must pray to God, O Lord, be gracious and turn the light of knowledge on thyself, that I may see thy face. Verse 12. He is the innermost self. He is the great Lord. He it is that reveals the purity within the heart, by means of which he, who is pure being, may be reached. He is the ruler. He is the great light, shining forever. He it is that reveals the purity within the heart, by means of which he, who is pure being, may be reached. After the Chicago World Parliament of Religions, Swami Vivekananda was invited to give a lecture tour throughout America. In a southern city, he spoke to his Christian crowd. Be not deluded by your religion teaching original sin, for the same religion teaches original purity. When Adam fell, he fell from purity, and the audience applauded. Vivekananda went on, purity is our real nature, and to regain that is the object of all religion. All men are pure, all men are good. That man you call a brute is like the diamond in the dirt and dust. Brush the dust off, and it is a diamond, just as pure as if the dust had never been on it. And we must admit that every soul is a big diamond. But we ask, what about our spiritual life here and now? Our teachers tell us, in the beginning, your mind is distracted and restless and full of impure thoughts. But you are struggling and striving to think, to concentrate, to meditate. Then all of a sudden, you feel a magnet, as it were, visibly, tangibly, drawing your mind within unto itself. All these thoughts leave you completely, and you feel you have no more desire for anything else. You only desire God. And that happens by his grace. It is he that gives you that purity of heart. He who through his grace makes you turn your head towards him. This is an actual experience one has, a sense that a magnet is drawing us within. He is the great light shining forever. So what is this light? The light of consciousness, Chit. The Chit of Satchit Ananda. We unknowingly live, move, and have our being in that light all the time. When we are awake, dreaming, asleep, we have that consciousness. That consciousness never leaves us, not even in death. But when we pray, real prayer is to feel that presence of God within ourselves and everywhere and in silence. Any thought or word or prayer that arises within ourselves is only possible because of the presence of that very consciousness. And that consciousness is God. Swami Pravrajika explained in his commentary, through that light of consciousness, we are conscious of everything else, every perception, In every thought, he is present. You need not talk to him, just think of him. And immediately he knows your heart. He knows your heart. He is present within us, around us, everywhere. We need only try to feel his presence. That is prayer. That is meditation. There's one incident that stands out in my mind. Swami used to tell us an incident. He was just sitting in his chair in the living room, and one of his fingers was quivering. And that in itself was an example of that consciousness within. Verse 13. This great being, assuming a form of the size of a thumb, forever dwells in the hearts of all creatures as their innermost self. He can be known directly by the purified heart through spiritual discrimination. Knowing him, men become immortal. This great being, assuming a form of the size of a thumb. Swami Nikhilananda, in his Upanishad commentary, explained that yogis meditate on the Atman as a luminous space in the heart which resembles a lotus bud and is of the size of a thumb. And we find the same description in the Katha Upanishad. But this description is not to be taken literally, but only as a guide to meditate on the luminous presence in the heart. Here, mind means ruler and controller of knowledge. Swami Nikhilananda explains its role. The yogi discriminates between the non-self and the self. The non-self consists of the body, the senses, the mind, the ego. The self is the perceiver of the non-self. In other words, that which can be perceived, objectified, is the non-self. And that is the process of discrimination. Advaitins use to free themselves from all ideas of the non-self and realize Brahman. That is the path of Neti Neti Atma. And some of you who have practiced Vivekananda's guided meditation and calming the lake of the mind, you also have experienced, you can see your thoughts, you can experience your emotions, your memories, all of that. Therefore, this mind is the non-self. That which is perceiving is the higher mind, which points to the unseen seer. So this verse gives us a most practical teaching to meditate upon God within ourselves. Though he is greater than the greatest and pervades this universe, he is in my consciousness. He is within my consciousness. He is within your consciousness. He is consciousness itself. And that consciousness is light. So we must try to think of that light within the shrine of our own heart. As Vivekananda said, use your spiritual imagination. That will take you where the intellect cannot go. And our teachers also tell us that we can meditate upon this light as having a form of a divine personality, a Christ, a Krishna, a Ramakrishna, the Divine Mother. But is this process of meditation self-hypnosis, one may ask? No, because as you try to figure out what your chosen ideal looks like, you take the help of a picture or photo or image. But then as you continue with your meditation practice, when the vision comes, it is different from that which you were visualizing. It may be another form or aspect of your chosen ideal, or it may be divine light. There's a beautiful example of this, which occurred with the child of Bhavatarini, whom our senior-most nuns in Santa Barbara met in India in 1959. Bhavatarani was only 8 years old when she met Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar, who asked her, "What is your opinion of me? Some say I am God himself. What do you think?" "Oh, no, 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 you're not God," she replied. In her own words, years later, she then recalled, "Then all of a sudden, I began to perceive a sweet fragrance used in worship. I thought the fragrance might be coming from him," meaning Sri Ramakrishna. "I tried to locate it and looked around his ears. While I was very close to him, suddenly Ramakrishna's form disappeared in a brilliant light, the color of the rising sun, and his form appeared as a luminous shadow in that light. I tried to feel his body, but could not. Then after some time, the light faded gradually, and again, I could see him." Years later, Bhavatarani went back to Dakshineshwar to ask Sri Ramakrishna about that experience. She was in his room, and he returned from the temple and sat near her. In her words, "But before I could ask him, I again saw his form disappearing in a blaze of light. I touched him again and again, but nothing happened. His body was soft, as though no bones were there. Then I lost consciousness, and my head fell on his lap. When I came to, I found Sri Ramakrishna passing his hand over my back. I said, 'Thakur, Thakur,' meaning master, master, what are you? Are you Bhagavan? Are you Krishna? Are you Rama? What are you, Thakur?" This was not only an external experience, but a deeply internal experience. The main thing is to try to turn our thoughts inward and to try to feel that presence of God, whatever or whoever our chosen ideal may be, within our own self. Verse 14. This great being has 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, and 1,000 feet. He envelops the universe. Though transcendent, he is to be meditated upon as residing in the lotus of the heart, at the center of the body. 10 fingers up from the navel. So it would be closed fingers up from the navel. Some describe it as 5 finger spans separated up from the navel. This verse and the following are identical with the Purusha Sukta found in the Rig Veda. In his commentary, Devadatta Kali, a Vedantin and scholar, gives a beautiful observation of what this verse provides us. He writes, "However we look across the broad expanse of this earth, in whichever direction, there is no place where the divine presence is not. It encompasses the whole world and saturates it through and through. Yet we must not forget that this ever-present, shining reality is not limited to the forms of creation." Here the verse reveals an extraordinary truth, although the language that expresses it strikes us at first as puzzling. This divine presence, Purusha, extends beyond the earth by 10 fingers breadth. So in the body, the heart center is situated a 10 closed finger span above the navel. This heart of awareness is the center of consciousness that resides within each one of us. Devadatta Kali reminds us, by making the fragmented awareness of ordinary consciousness one-pointed, by uniting all the mental powers directing them inward and merging them in the single inner light of the heart. That is their source. The meditator can reach beyond the multiplicity of the world and enter into the ineffable peace of the pure self. Miraculously, that blissful core of reality is but the breadth of 10 fingers away. It's like standing over a buried treasure. It's right under us, so near, nearer than the nearest. Verse 15, Svetasvatara tells us, he alone is all this, what has been said and what shall be. He has become this universe, yet he remains forever changeless and is the Lord of immortality. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, God laughs on 2 occasions. He laughs when the physician says to the patient's mother, don't be afraid, mother. I shall certainly cure your boy. God laughs, saying to himself, I am going to take his life, and this man says he will save it. The physician thinks he is the master, forgetting that God is the master. God laughs again when 2 brothers divide their land with a string, saying to each other, this side is mine, and that side is yours. He laughs and says to himself, the whole universe belongs to me, but they say they own this portion or that portion. So what about the personal God? Or is it just the impersonal reality that becomes this universe? Sri Ramakrishna erases our doubts. After he went into samadhi and gradually came down to the sense plane, he said, Krishna, 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 Krishna Sachidananda. Nowadays, I do not see your form. Now I see you both inside me and outside. I see that it is you who have become the universe, all living beings, the 24 cosmic principles, and everything else. You alone have become mind, intelligence, everything. You alone are the indivisible. Again, it is you who pervades the universe of the animate and the inanimate. You are verily the manifold universe. Again, you alone are its basis. O Krishna, you are my life. You are my mind. You are my intelligence. You are my soul. O Govinda, you are my life breath. You are my life itself. When the form of God melts into formless reality, aspirants see the non-dual aspect of their chosen ideal, pervading all, the universe, as well as their body, mind, and senses. How does this body of flesh and blood become transformed into spirit, as it were? Sri Ramakrishna explains. Sachidananda is like an endless expanse of water, the water of the great ocean. In cold regions, freezes into blocks of ice. Similarly, through the cooling influence of divine love, Sachidananda assumes forms for the sake of the bhaktas, devotees. The rishis had the vision of the supersensuous spirit form and talked with it. But devotees acquire a love body, and with its help, they see the spirit form of the absolute. Now, this love body develops through spiritual practice. By meditation, repetition of the mantra, the practice of karma yoga and discrimination, our body and mind are purified. It's a long, slow process, but it does work. Verse 17, himself devoid of senses, he shines through the functions of the senses. He is the friend and refuge of all. The indwelling self experiences life within the universe through the sense faculties of every living creature, and most fully manifest through every human being, whether we know it or not. Because the principle of consciousness is there within us, as the Kena Upanishad so poignantly expresses, at whose behest does the mind think? Who bids the body live? Who makes the tongue speak? Who is that effulgent being that directs the eye to form and color and the ear to sound? The self is the ear of the ear, mind of the mind, speech of the speech. He is also breath of the breath and eye of the eye. Now, whenever we think, I know, I see, I hear, that I is the voice of the small self. That is the point of error, the cause of our ignorance. Instead, it is our true nature, pure consciousness itself, that is the light that shines through our mind and all our senses, and is therein the cause of our knowing, the cause of our seeing, the cause of our hearing. Again, as the Kena Upanishad so beautifully expresses, the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, speech of the speech, and also breath of the breath, and eye of the eye. That light of pure consciousness is like the sun. It knows nothing, but because of the sun, I know. It is the cause of my knowing. It is the cause of our knowing. The Supreme Self who reigns over all and resides at the center of all experience. Those who realize this become free. I'd like to close with a guided meditation on non-dual meditation that Swami Vivekananda gave in his Jnana Yoga class. So let us sit straight in our chairs or on the floor, spine straight, chest slightly forward, and hands held loosely in our lap as Vivekananda behind, the right palm upturned, resting on the left upturned palm. Let's begin by taking in 3 deep breaths. Breathing in deeply and exhaling completely. In Vivekananda's words, first we begin our meditation by negation. Think away everything we are not. Analyze everything that comes in the mind by the sheer action of the will. The body drinks, eats, and so on. I am not the body. I am not the mind. I am not thought. I am he. Next, assert what we really are. Existence, knowledge, and bliss. Being, knowing, and loving. Meditation is a means of unification of the subject and object. Meditate above it is full of me. Below, it is full of me. In the middle, it is full of me. I am in all beings, and all beings are in me. Om Tat Sat. I am that. I am existence above mind. I am the one spirit of the universe. I am neither pleasure nor pain. I am He. I am the witness. I look on. When health comes, I am the witness. When disease comes, I am the witness. I am existence, knowledge, bliss. I am the essence and nectar of knowledge. Through eternity, I change not. I am calm, resplendent, and unchanging. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.